Hey, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. If this is your first time to one of our live events, welcome. If this is kind of becoming a regular thing, we appreciate you joining us once again. Tonight's presentation should be really fun. This is going to be it's like a live alumni panel where our goal is to kind of share what the client experience is like on our guided trips. And normally Katie and I are the ones who control the narrative about our trips, but we decided to kind of like bring these alumni on and let them tell their stories and their experiences with us. And if you're out there and watching this event tonight because you're interested in maybe joining one of our trips in 2025 or some future year, this will just kind of give you a little bit better feel for what the experiences are like, and also like a little bit of an unbiased fashion as well.
Yes. So if you have questions, for our panelists, we would love for you to submit questions. You can do that in the chat box down at the bottom of your screen. And then, so we'll take those like throughout the presentation as we go. We're hoping to run for about 60 minutes tonight, as long as we still have questions and you guys are submitting questions. And then a few reminders before we bring our panelists on. So our 2025 guided trip registration is open currently, and it ends on December 22nd. Well, the early application window ends then, and you want to get in before then to get first 2024 pricing, because it's going to go up after that, and then also to get your first choice trip. So it's the 12th today, so you have 10 days to get that in. And then I wanted to also mention that we did if you are interested in trip with us this year, we did a live FAQ. When was that go? A week ago, this Thursday.
Last Thursday.
Yeah, and that's on Andrew's YouTube channel. So if you do, we answered a ton of questions in that, and so it may be an easier way for you to like digest the information if maybe you have gone through the website or maybe you haven't, but I think we covered a lot of really great information there. So if you are interested and you want to know more about the trips, I would recommend checking that out.
I'd also say too, so in addition to that event from last Thursday, just if you're interested in a trip and you're kind of like on the fence or like have questions, just reach out to Katie or to me. Like if you were to call me, like I will pick up the phone. Here's my number, ready for it, 720-279-4801. So this is still a very small, intimate program. That's the kind of service that we give. Katie, can we remind everyone about one event that we're working on for next week?
Oh, yes. Yeah, this idea just came about. So next Thursday, is that what we decided on? Yes, next Thursday. Mm-hmm. It'll be announced on our Instagram page. We're going to do another live stream that's going to be about the 15-year history of the company. So this is Andrew's 15th season running the company, and I'm going to get to interview him a little bit about the early days, and maybe we're going to dig up some photos. So if you're interested, join us then. What?
I'm wondering if I should explain what even sparked the idea for this.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You want to show that photo?
Yes, that would be a great teaser.
Here we go. Okay, let's see. All right, so I get an email this morning from a client, Cody, who'd been on a trip in 2000, and he was on a trip in 2013, and he sent me this photo. So this is let's see, I would have been 36, and this is Adventure Alan Dixon, and that's Cody. So, and I went like, wow, I've been doing this for a really long time because I don't look like that anymore. So, so that's the inspiration for that event. Okay, so let's, Katie, I think we can start bringing in our guests.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so we're going to start bringing in our guests one by one, and we're going to take that time when they come in. We're going to have them introduce themselves, and then once we have the whole panel here, we'll start talking. Okay, so we're going to go in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Connor. Connor,
hey everybody.
Welcome to the program.
Thanks Andrew, thanks Katie, thanks for having me on. My name is Connor Puckett. I'm currently based out of Philadelphia.
For one more day.
Currently, yeah. We can get into that if time allows.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like family, career, hobbies?
Yeah, absolutely. So my girlfriend and I are currently up in Philly. So obviously hobbies include the outdoors, but we are also heavily into the board game scene. So actually there was a big board game convention here in Philly last weekend. So we spent all weekend inside doing some adventuring as well. So that was a lot of fun. So I was a participant on for my first trip with Andrew's guide service last year on an Alaska 7-day trip, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So again,
And what have
happy
you
to be here
done?
to
What
talk
was
about it.
your backpacking experience when you joined the program?
Yeah, so I've had grew up in scouts and had a lot of all that sort of thing. But also my brother and I thru hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in 2015. So we'd had a good amount of on trail travel, but this was like a real the Alaska trip was a real off trail kind of test for me, I'd say. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, next up, I'm going to bring in Eric.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Eric.
Eric Wright. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I have a family with my wife and 2 sons, both of whom are away at college now. I'm a lawyer at a nonprofit and kind of looking towards retirement here sometime in the next few years.
Okay. And Eric, how many trips have you been on with us at this point?
5. I've been in the Sierra, Utah, West Virginia, the Olympics in Washington State, my home state, and most recently, Alaska.
Yeah, I think that's like so only Yellowstone remains. You're going to graduate out of our program. And Katie, any other questions for Eric? I think he managed to cover it pretty well.
Yeah, I think that was everything.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Thank you, Eric. All right, we'll be back with you. All right, so we're going to bring Kaylor. Kaylor, you have the show.
My name is Kaylor. I live in Boone, North Carolina, kind of in the western mountains of North Carolina. I'm married, no kids, but do have a lovely fur child who's my dog. For work, I am a project manager at an architecture and interior design firm. And for fun, I like to hike, which I'm sure is a common thread. And I'm also very cutthroat in board games. And not competitive at all. Sarcasm. And before
Kaylor.
last year, oh, go ahead.
No, I think you're going exactly where I want you to go. Yep.
I was going to say last year, I did a trip in Utah, but that was my first backpacking trip ever. So before that, I had no backpacking experience. I had car camped and done a lot of day hikes, but had never done any backpacking. So it was my first backpacking experience at all.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's bring Lisa in to finish up our group. Hey, Lisa.
Hey there. Yeah, I live in Indianapolis and I have 4 kids. The last one is a senior in high school. And I'm a patent attorney, do mostly patent litigation. So my schedule is kind of like a roller coaster most of the time. And I've been on 4 trips with Andrew's group. I've been to Yosemite and Escalante. Those were both 7-day trips. And then I was on 2 11-day trips, first to Kings Canyon, the High Basin route. And then last year I went to Alaska, to the Brooks Range. Before that, I had done some backpacking, and my son, when he was about 15 or so, decided he wanted to go backpacking. So we did a few shorter trips, but eventually ended up hiking the JMT, or the John Muir Trail, because I really love the Sierras and love to get out there at every opportunity. So that just seemed like a natural fit. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, here's our panel.
Yeah.
You guys ready for a bunch of hardball questions?
Tough. Okay.
So I would pitch to the audience too. So we're doing this for you. So if you have questions of them, we would love to hear it in the chat. So please ask away. But Katie and I have a long list of questions. Definitely, we're never going to get through all of them in 60 minutes. Katie, do you want to start with these?
Yes. Let's start with what motivated you guys to join the first trip that you came on with us. Some of you have only been on one trip with us, but especially like Lisa and Eric. Well, for all of you, what made you join the first trip, and then Lisa and Eric, what made you return? Because you all come from different backgrounds, different levels of experience.
How do you want to go?
Yeah.
How are we going to do this order?
I know. How about, I like the alphabetical. We can keep doing that.
Or do we want to do reverse alphabetical?
Okay, yeah, let's do reverse
Okay.
alphabetical.
I was gonna
Melissa,
say
you're-
then it just ends up being me faltering
Mhm.
every single time, and
Yeah.
everybody else having perfect responses.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, Lisa, we're going to move you to the front. So go ahead.
Okay. I think the reason I looked at taking a trip with Andrew's group is I had, like I mentioned, I did a lot of backpacking in the High Sierras, and I decided I wanted to do a portion of the Sierra High Route, which is off trail. And the portion I chose was that which crosses the Ritter Range, which is just south of the border, the Yosemite border. And I did that, but in the process, it was a solo trip. But in the process, I realized I really needed to get a better handle on how to navigate well and how to route find really well, especially if I was going to be doing more solo trips. And so I, looked around for some resources and, hit upon Andrew. I actually read through the hiker's gear guide that he had, put out, and gleaned a lot of information from that. But felt like, taking a trip with him and his guides would really cement, my skills a lot more solidly. So that's what motivated me, and what keeps me coming back are the people and the guides. They're just phenomenal guides and fantastic groups of people. And since I've had that experience solo backpacking, I really prefer hiking with people. I find it so much more interesting. I'm constantly learning things from other people as well as the guides. You think, oh, you might take away everything on a trip from just the guides, but your fellow hikers have a lot of information to share as well, and a lot of sometimes specialties, special information or gifts or skills that they have that are really useful. So that's what keeps me coming back, is just, wonderful people and just having a great time out there.
Katie, I feel like we hear that a lot. Like that is such a common customer or client journey. Like they come for the skills or the knowledge, and then they stick around for the people. Yeah. So, and Lisa, I think it's worth pointing out too. I would imagine as a patent attorney, like an active, and I know from from email communications with you, and that you have a very busy work schedule. So, just kind of being able to just kind of plug into what we're doing too. It probably is also very convenient.
Yeah.
Okay, let's, there's a great question from, it's a very odd it's a username that I'm not making sense of right now. But I think, Katie, maybe Eric could speak to this too so Eric, the question is, from a fitness standpoint, please compare the Sierra High Route to Alaska. And maybe we could, although actually, Lisa, you're the one who was just talking about the Sierra High Route. Eric, have you been on, I know did a 7-day trip with us in the Sierra, but have you been on sections of the Sierra Route?
Yeah, it was a 7-day trip in the Sierra, and then of course Alaska was 11 days.
Okay. All right. Lisa, I'm going to pitch that to you when we come back. But let's keep going with this question of why you joined the first trip and Eric, in your case, why you keep coming back. So we're going to keep going in reverse order. So Kayla, we're going to move you. It's your turn.
So I went on the trip with my friend Chelsea, and the two of us had really decided that we wanted to get into take our hiking experience into more of a backpacking experience, but neither of us had ever backpacked before. So we really wanted to do the program so that we could just know what we were doing. We don't know. I mean, we have some friends that are backpackers, but felt like it would just be something that would really give us some independence and knowledge. And I guess this program is really geared for teaching and providing that education. And so we thought that this was just a really good fit for what we wanted to do. And I think that we came away from the experience feeling really confident in those skills. And I haven't been on another trip yet, but we are going to go on another trip in 2025. And I would just say that we're coming back because we had such a good experience with the group travel. I'm realizing we're going to say a lot of the same things, but and we just got so much from the other people that were in our group, in addition to like the guides are brilliant. So it was really fun.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Eric, you're next. Eric, your audio is.
Sorry. I was saying, I think my story is similar to a lot of people's. I grew up hiking with my father and my grandfather. I was a Boy Scout, had a lot of outdoor experience there. Did some hiking with the outdoor club in college, but after that, between work and family and everything else, I didn't have time for much more than day hikes, especially when my kids were little, and occasional 1 or 2 nighters, and I loved it. But as my kids got older and my time freed up a bit, I wanted to challenge myself, but also just spend more time outdoors, and outdoors, sweating, working, not just sort of passively observing it. And I also started looking around for a way to do that, knowing that I probably needed to, update my kit and my leave no trace skills and all of that. And I came across Andrew's website, and it just struck me as ideal because, I wanted to learn, but I didn't want to start from the bare zero. I wanted, an experience that could adapt to what I knew and what I didn't know. And I found that mix here.
Okay, awesome. All right, and Connor, why don't you go ahead and finish up?
Perfect. Yeah. So my rationale touches on a lot of that as well for signing up for the first one. I think coming into it, I had a pretty significant level of experience with having done some the Pacific Crest Trail and some other backpacking adventures and scouts. But I think for me, what really attracted me into this was the refining of a lot of these skills in an environment that you get the opportunity to be tested at a very high level, right? So route finding in Alaska, if your skill set or your kit, is okay in other environments, when you get into those environments, it's like whether it's good or bad. The okay doesn't really exist. For me, at least at that point. And so I wanted the opportunity to figure out where those kind of limits were, both in an environment that is just awesome in all senses of the words, but also with almost that safety net of experienced guides and a group around me who are all looking to get similar things out of it as well. And this seemed like the best opportunity to kind of check those boxes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a bunch of nice questions and good questions from the audience. So I think, Katie, what we should do, we'll just, rather than like the round robin, we'll just kind of toss these out and let one person answer it, and we'll just move on to the next one. Otherwise, we're 18 minutes in, we've gotten through one question. So yeah, so okay, so Lisa, I think this is a good question for you. This is from Tim from Bay City, Michigan. Tim, my wife's family is all from that area in Pinconning and in Bay City, so I know it well. Lisa, the question is, from a fitness standpoint, please compare the Sierra High Route to Alaska.
From a fitness standpoint, I think they're probably fairly similar. The Sierra High Route and the High Sierra, there's a lot of elevation gain and loss quickly. You have a probably similar elevation gain and loss total, but it seems like Alaska is just, the scale is just so much bigger. It is just broad valleys in a lot of cases. And I found that it wasn't really, for at least the route that we took, probably many routes in Alaska, but it didn't seem to be quite as physically challenging as some had been for me in Yosemite and on the high route. But I'm sure that might be dependent upon where exactly you're going in the Brooks Range.
I think that's actually a pretty good answer. Yeah, Katie, you've been spent enough time up there. I think that's like the correct, yeah. Okay, so The next question is from Jake. And Katie, who should we pitch this one out to? Maybe let's go with Eric. So Eric, like, how was the physical preparedness, like, or what was your like level of physical preparedness coming into the trip? And like, did you change? Like, did you train harder for some locations more than others?
I think my preparation was similar across different trips. I think that the challenge for me has always been that I'm not a runner, can't be a runner. So between cycling and the gym and hiking up and down my local hills, trying to figure out how to turn that into a fitness program that works at altitude and over multiple days is challenging. But I think that with the exception of Alaska, which with its terrain has I thought challenges for a big guy like me. I think that the fitness demands of the various trips are different in the execution, but at the core, a lot of leg work, acclimating to altitude. Those are all kind of common themes among most of the trips that I've been on.
Yep. Good answer.
Yeah.
Katie, I'm looking at this question from Neil. I'm thinking maybe Kaylor for this.
I was thinking the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question is, Neil says, I consider myself kind of an advanced beginner. I did TMB, a 2 to 3 night backpack. I did 2 to 3 night backpacks around the world, but not many tough conditions. What intermediate or advanced type skills might I learn?
I think that one thing that's I think most people glean from going on any circuit trip is just the navigation. There's a lot of off-trail travel, so a lot of people that were coming into the program, even that were in my group that had done a lot of backpacking, had not had a lot of off-trail experience. So there was a ton of opportunity to, like, the first half of the trip, we had a paper map and a compass, and really just learning how to read the topography, how to identify features, and then how to get around with just that. And then later in the trip, we integrated using like technology and how to navigate. So I would say that was a pretty huge focus, especially in Utah, where there is a lot of opportunity for that. And then I think that everyone there was like, even for an intermediate or an advanced, like, people were just picking up a lot of skills, learning what gear other people were using, because you're in this group environment. So people were able to kind of pick up on what other people do. And I think that there's a lot of information that you're gathering there. And then in the curriculum itself, you're learning a lot of just how to best prepare, how to tune in your gear. And if you've not done a lot of like ultralight backpacking, I think that that's a pretty big focus too, is like learning how to kind of tune in your gear.
Okay, thank you. There's a question I think Connor would help with, or that could answer pretty well. So Joey asks, I'm curious if anyone has found people from their trips that they've backpacked with outside of like going on a circuit trip together. So basically, like, did you make friends on one of our trips that you then continue to backpack with afterwards?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I'll be honest, it was not something I expected to have from my trip, right? I'm typically more of a solo person and was like, okay, I'll be with a group and it'll be fine, and then I'll go and continue to be a solo person. But the group dynamic and the way that all the people end up in your group is matched in such a way that it truly felt like there were people in our group that I'd be more than happy to go on another trip with. And so there's actually, I'm moving soon for professional opportunity to a different state. And two of the guys who were in my group also live there. And so we're talking about coming up with like a big backpacking trip where the three of us can kind of reconnect and go do that. So It hasn't happened yet, to be fair, but the opportunity is definitely there, and I think the group dynamic is such that you really start to click with the folks you're with over the time you're there, and the opportunities there if you want it afterwards.
I think, Lisa, if I could go back to you, so like you live in Indiana, where
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of other hikers from Indiana, and you're
Yeah.
also like an extremely fit person. Would you be willing to like talk a little bit more about the matchmaking that we go through on these trips and how that's worked out for you?
Sure. Yeah, with respect to, well, like my fitness, because I live in Indiana, I mean, it's just very, very flat. I don't really have a lot of opportunity to, go out and do hikes that are really going to build much leg strength. So I do a lot of running personally. And that's kind of where I get my fitness, and that's how I do my training. And I don't really do anything go on backpacking trips in order to train for backpacking. My training is just running. But one of the nice things about Andrew's groups is that he asks some, more detailed questions about, your fitness. Um, Even if it's not out backpacking, how many days a week do you cycle? If you're into cycling, or, exactly what type of fitness you do, at what level. As much information as you can give him, I think is, the more information, the better, because he can use that information and kind of interpolate and extrapolate from it and try to put together groups that work well from a fitness standpoint. Because I think of the 4 trips I've been on, the 30 other um, backpackers that I have met through Andrew, um, there's only been one instance where that person didn't really fit the fitness of everyone else, and so 1 out of 30 is not bad odds. I think for the most part, the process that Andrew goes through in matching people, as long as those people reflect honestly what their fitness level is, what their expectations or their ability to train for the trip is going to be. I think that honesty that is really needed, so that Andrew can match the groups and put the groups together that are going to work well together.
Great, thanks. And I will just, you're giving me a lot of credit, but I will point out that Katie, for the last 2
Yeah.
seasons, has done all of the application reviewing.
Okay.
Katie, how many applications have you reviewed already over the last 3 days?
I think it's about 130 in the past 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
too much time in front of the computer.
Yeah. And we try really hard with that matchmaking process. And we also know that, if we're wrong 1 out of 8 times, on average, we mess up every single trip.
Yeah.
So we take it pretty seriously.
Yeah.
So Terry Nat has a question. I don't know if the panel actually could answer it that well, but can you rank the high routes in order of least to most challenging? So could I try that one? I know it's not my panel, but all right. So let me go in the opposite direction. So the hardest one is probably the Wind River High Route. The second hardest is the Kings Canyon High Basin Route. The third would be probably the Fifner Traverse. Fourth would be Yosemite High Route, and I think that the least challenging is maybe the Yosemite High Route and the Sierra High Route, probably about similar. So there it is. Take it over, Katie.
Do you want to keep going with the chat, or should we jump back to?
I think that there are a lot of good questions here.
I can answer. So Jake
Yeah.
says, is recovery emphasis part of the curriculum, best practices, tips, etc., or are people left to their own processes? So it's not part of our, I'm just going to take this one quickly. It's not part of our standard curriculum, but folks are welcome to ask the guides like pretty much anything that they want. And I encourage that on my trips, and I know many of the other guides do as well. So even if you have questions that aren't covered, whether it's a terrain question and you're in the desert and you're not going to have big water crossings, but you want to know about big water crossing, ask your guide. Or if you want to know about recovery practices and what your guides do, or what as our panelists have been talking about, like what the people on your trip with you also do, there's tons of great information to pick up about like pretty much whatever you want to ask about. So I always encourage people to do that.
And then, Katie, I think we should also go with this last question from Jake. Who would you like to pitch that to?
Let's see. Hiking by 5:30. I'm gonna read it out loud first. I'm a slow hiker, but I hike long days. Hiking by 5:30 till 9-10 p.m. Would this conflict with how the trips are structured?
So I think the question for our alumni is like, what has been the typical, like, over the trips you've been on, what's the typical day like?
I think, well, Eric has been on many trips.
Let's go with Eric. Okay.
Yes.
Here you go, Eric.
There's a lot of continuity among the different trips. Usually you're up early in the morning. I tend to get up a little bit earlier than most, I think, just so that I have a little bit of time to reflect before the day starts and kind of think about what I need to be focusing on that day. That's usually, wake up time is usually somewhere between 6 and 7, I think. Breakfast, between, breaking down your tent or your shelter and eating breakfast, you might get out of camp anywhere between 7 and 8, depending. There is definitely a lunchtime. There is often a break or two during the morning piece of the day, and sometimes that's for a snack. Sometimes it's because you come across a really great place to just stop and look, whether it's a cave with carvings on the wall in Utah, or stopping in Alaska and looking across a valley, fortunately looking across a valley at a bear or a herd of elk. Lunch is usually, anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. The afternoon looks a bit like the morning, with stops for either sightseeing or skills development. I think the hiking day ends, anywhere that's a little bit more variable. Anywhere from an early day would be 3:30, 4 o'clock. A late day might be 6:30, depending on how long your breaks have been during the day and whether you're happy with the campsite you found. And then everybody takes time after they arrive in camp to set up their shelter and then gather for dinner, which is usually my favorite time of the day. I love the hiking part, but sitting around making dinner with folks, talking about your day, getting to know one another better, that's the greatest. And people usually chat for a bit after dinner, but when it starts getting dark, people head towards their shelters and take care of brushing the teeth and all that. And my day usually ends pretty early. I try to get to sleep so that I can wake up ready to go the next day.
Okay, thank you. Katie, what would be your response or advice to someone who describes themselves as a slow hiker who hikes starting at 5:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, and is wondering if that conflicts with how the trips are structured?
Well, I would be curious if he's hiking, how many miles that person is covering in that time, and then we would just put them into the appropriate fitness level. So maybe that might mean bumping down a fitness level to from like a moderate to a basic, for instance, just to like have more time to cover those miles. But so it's we don't usually start hiking at 5:30, nor do we hike until 9 or 10 p.m. But if you can, that'd be a very long day. But if you can condense those miles into like a 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And feel comfortable with that, then that's more of like a kind of standard schedule that most of our groups keep.
Last year I had two of the longest days I've ever guided. One was with Connor's group. Connor, the 22-mile day in Alaska. Was it 22 or 23? Was it 28?
Something like that. Yeah.
And Thankfully, we had 24 hours of daylight, so it didn't matter. But then I tried to do that again with another group in Yellowstone, and we hiked, I think, like 3 hours by headlamp that night. So
Moral of the story is don't join Andrew's trips.
Yeah. No.
I just
Okay. So I think this is a good question for Kaylor. So Kaylor, can you tell, like, what was your biggest concern coming on your first trip with us and as a first-time backpacker?
Well, I would say that I generally was nervous about everything. I was nervous about looking like a dumbass in front of a lot of other people that had backpacked a lot, including Andrew, because Andrew guided my trip. And I totally accomplished that, but in the best way. So it was not necessarily something to worry about. I was nervous about my fitness level. I feel like I had a lot of anxiety about am I going to be able to keep up with everyone, or am I going to like just jive with the pace? I was nervous about pooping in the woods. I'd never done that. So, but got the best tutorial. And I would say I was nervous about just knowing like if the group dynamics were going to go well. But that kind of covers it. I would say I was nervous about everything.
When you said how you like worried about looking like a dumbass, I'm trying to remember but it was a sequence of things. But I don't remember what they were. I feel like one day you like lost your spoon in the morning and it like reappeared the next morning. Like what was
I did not lose my spoon, but well, I did lose a pen at one point. But the first night it was a humbling experience. But the first night I didn't properly shut my my sleeping pad. So I woke up on slick rock. And I like all night I was so arrogant that I thought it was my gear was bad. It couldn't possibly have been me, like the brand new backpacker with brand new gear. I just didn't shut the valve. I also you told me to put my compass in my pocket of my pants, and I told you I didn't. I looked down, I was like, my pants don't have pockets. These hiking pants that I've worn plenty of times. And I had like normal pockets. I mean, it was.
Right. I pointed out that you actually had pockets. Yes, you were insistent that you didn't have pockets on your pants. I'm like, I think those were. Yeah.
Those are notable, but there were many.
Okay, Katie, you're up.
Okay. Well, we have one in the chat, so let's do that. So Armanush asks, for the longer trips, are there any memorable mistakes either before or during the trip that you would have done differently? Does anyone have anything that like popped into their mind that they want to answer? So any memorable mistakes that you would have done differently?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was a mistake, but I think something I overestimated was that I could train in and around Philly for a 7-day Alaskan backpacking trip. And so I think the training is obviously very important to make sure you maintain that physical ability. But I think the mistake for me was like almost going into it with a level of confidence that probably wasn't correct because I've been doing hikes here and I've been doing that kind of stuff. Like it'll be fine. And I think it was for me, it was just remembering that like, once you're there, and the actual elements or environment you're in, you need to still have the skill to react to whatever it is instead of just assuming you've done everything right at the beginning. So maybe not a mistake in the normal sense, but I found myself on terrain where I was like, I need to remember how to recover from this instead of just assuming I can hike over it. So, yeah.
Katie, you're still up.
Okay. How about, so we have one that says, what was the biggest challenge you faced and how did you overcome it? I actually would love to hear everybody's for this. If you guys can give us a concise answer so we can keep knocking some out. Let's start with Lisa.
Okay, so biggest challenge I faced, I think it was more of a kind of an event that occurred on my first trip in Yosemite. I did a triple endo or end over end down a pass, and popped back up. And fortunately, I was fine, nothing broken, just a few scrapes. Um, but it presented a challenge sort of for our whole group because I was then very kind of gun shy to go up an even more difficult pass that had been kind of touted as like the pass of the trip. And I think our guides handled it really well. Understandably that night when we had to kind of split our groups up in Yosemite. So when we came back together for dinner, we talked it through and said, hey, I'm probably not feeling all that comfortable going up this even more difficult pass. And everybody was really understanding. And the guides were like, I think, we can put together and go a different way and we don't have to go over that pass. And they handled it really well and allowed me the space to kind of say, hey, I'm not sure I'm feeling really confident that I want to do that. And everybody else was so gracious. And I think, later some of the other team members, maybe made me feel better. I'm not sure, but they said, I wasn't really thrilled about going over that pass either, given what we had done. And I'm really glad that we're taking a little bit different route. But that was, kind of that we, completed the trip. That was great. On the second trip that I took with Andrew's group to Utah, I kind of had to overcome some of that fear of, just losing footing and all of that in the canyons of Escalante. And, was kind of helped through that really quickly and got over it super quickly because I just was given the space to address it and move on, move through it and gain my confidence back. And so that's, I think, the biggest challenge that I faced, especially the first trip, second trip.
Who's next, Katie?
Let's do Kaylor.
I guess I kind of shared that I just had a lot of little mishaps. I think it was frustrating. But I guess moving through that though, everyone in the team was really supportive. And we laughed a lot. I laughed at myself. Everyone laughed with me. And I think that it made it something, instead of being something that was really shameful, it felt like something that just made it fun and more lighthearted. And then just had incredible guides that were really helpful in educating and not demeaning or talking down.
Great. Thanks.
Katie, are you also picking up a little bit of background noise?
I hear a little bit. It's not super bad, but I'll tell you that.
Okay. Can you hear Amanda running the Dyson in the room next to me?
No, but that's
fantastic.
Great.
Okay.
And he would have to be at 6:42 p.m.
So let's move on to Eric. We haven't heard from you for a little while. What was the biggest challenge that you had on your group or one of your trips, and how did you overcome it?
I think that listening to everybody who's spoken before, I think my story is going to sound very familiar. On my Alaska trip, towards the end of the trip, I got sick, had some sort of stomach bug, threw up my dinner, went to bed that night, didn't get a good night's sleep, struggled the next day on the trail, and then neglected my nutrition so that I wasn't taking in enough calories. And, at some point, I just wasn't keeping up with the group. And I think that's bad enough. But the low point was that not only the guides, but people in my group offered to take some weight off my pack. And at first, my pride kept me from accepting that help, which just made things worse. Fortunately, I came to my senses and people helped out. My entire group helped out, and I made it to the end of the trip with, I hope, a little bit of a recovery by the end. But it was a tough experience. But I think the willingness not only of the guides, but also of people who 10 days before had been total strangers, to take weight off my pack when they themselves had to, carry their own pack through what was a tough time outdoors was just amazing to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Connor.
Yeah, so actually, I'm glad you said that, Eric, because I think mine is kind of complementary to that as well. So I'd say one of the bigger challenges I faced, especially at the beginning of the trip and pre-trip, was it when the trips were announced and the groups were announced. It turned out that our group ended up being an all-male group, and so for me. I like to keep a lot of different folks in my friend groups and going outside. And so when I heard all male group going backpacking for 7 days, my initial reaction was one where I was like, oh man, it's like, is this going to be like the Macho Tour, 23 or whatever, or 24, I guess. And so I think one of the ways that feeling was overcome was meeting everybody and being able to have the pre-trip opportunity to like get to know everybody a little bit and kind of see who we were. But also the guides for our trip, Andrew and then Brandon, really made a conscious effort to say like, hey, like we're not trying to go and be like, this kind of off the wall or stereotypical like all male group. And so I didn't have to feel like I was competing in manliness with the other guys on my group, which made it a much more enjoyable and collaborative environment. And so it was biggest challenge for me at the front end, just trying to get over that mental hurdle. And I think the structure of the training within your particular group, but also kind of the expectations that were set at the front end were really helpful in overcoming that.
And if you tune in next Thursday, you might hear a story of the similar group where I learned the lesson of why to keep that macho ego thing in check. So, all right. There's a good question from Jake, but I think the way the lead in here is, I think we'll kind of go round robin on this, Katie, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think
so you're not allowed, even if you wanted to, so you're not allowed to answer Andrew or Katie, but we would like to hear about who your favorite guide has been and what made them so memorable. So let's start with Kaylor. Kaylor gets her choice of one.
Well, I'm not allowed to say Andrew or Katie, but so Ella was our other guide, and she was really special. I think that she really balanced Andrew in a way that Andrew's just super logical in a great way, and also very caring. But I think that Ella was a lot more tender, really empathetic. She really would come and check in with people. I know that my friend Chelsea at times was really struggling with missing her kids, and Ella was really sweet about checking in with her about that and empathizing there. And when I went off to poop in the woods for the first time, she gave me a little pep talk. So she was really thoughtful and kind in her approach, and even after the trip, being really thoughtful and sending cards. So it was a really great experience having her on the trip.
Okay, thank you. All right, Eric.
I'm not even going to try and name a first. I've hiked with a lot of the guides in the program. I've had a great experience every time. I think probably what I would say is that all of the guides that I have been able to hike with have had quality, a very similar overlap of core qualities, even though they all have different skills and different interests. But they are all none of them are stuck on a pre-planned, trip. It's there's lots of consultation with people hiking. Where are we going today? Where do we want to go? What do we want to think about? What do we want to see? There's a very practical attitude that I appreciate about how to make it work. If you've got a problem with your tent or your stove, or you're having trouble with your route finding, let's figure out what the issue is and solve it in a way that makes sense and sticks with you long term. Everybody has a great sense of humor, even if they're, fairly serious and buttoned down. Generally, everybody can stop and laugh at themselves, laugh at a joke. And they're all great at encouraging a real group feeling that, you're doing something special, and that, getting to know each other is important as getting to know the plants and the birds and everything else. So, sorry, I'm just gonna reject the question.
It's the which of your kids do you like the most question. All right, we'll see if Lisa will be more specific for us.
Yeah, I really echo Eric's all of his sentiments, but I have to say I've gone on 3 different treks with Jeff Wall, and I've just truly enjoy being out in the woods with him, or out wherever we are in Escalante, wherever. He's funny, he's empathetic, he's so supportive, he's patient, just all the qualities that Eric just mentioned, he has in spades. And I learn so much from him each and every time I go. And he also, really, I think, cares for each of the people he's guiding, and he wants each of them to succeed, to learn the skills that they're, wanting, craving, to see them grow. And just, he takes, pride in helping you along the way, and making sure that you're, that he can help you, achieve your goals. And I think also he creates a really wonderful, safe space for each of the members of the group to, whether it's express concerns in any forum, or in any form, to him. And we have worked through various group dynamics and group issues, and he's really just a fantastic leader, and somebody that, I've just enjoyed being out there getting it done. So yeah, he's just always a fun person to be out in the environment hiking. So
I would agree with that.
Me too.
Okay, Connor, we're gonna since you only have one too, I think we're gonna.
No worries.
We could talk a lot about great things about Brain and Chase, but Katie, what do you have for me?
Well, I think you were trying to use that to lead into this question that says, is there a process for getting a particular guide?
Thank you.
Yes. So you can request a guide on your application, and we make no guarantees, but we can try. It depends if you're a location where that guide is also. Like, there's a lot of variables to consider. So.
Depends on a lot of things. Usually the answer is no. It's pretty difficult. Yeah. There's a lot of pieces that go into both like the trip that we put you on, and who you're with, and then assigning, and like also a lot of considerations when we assign guides to trips. So,
yeah.
Odds are you probably won't get the guide that you want the most, but I often say that if this guiding thing doesn't work out, I could go into being a recruiter, because I have made a bunch of very, very good hiring decisions over the years. So our guide team is pretty top notch. So let's there's a question from Ed that I think that Katie and I were hoping to get to too. So let's talk about the food a little bit. What is let's go around the room real quick. What's your favorite breakfast and favorite dinner? Connor.
All right, so my favorite breakfast for sure was like the breakfast burrito thing. I'm not sure if that's because we ended up with like 2x the quantity of bacon we were supposed to have on our trip, but
That's right, because we stole it from the next week's ration.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was certainly good. And I don't know that I actually had a favorite dinner. I think by the time we got to dinner, I was glad to be shoveling whatever was in front of us inside of me. I will say on the food, I've got not quite a laundry list of allergies, but it was a little difficult for our group, and it was very accommodating. So even with that, I felt like everything kind of balanced the way it was supposed to. So yeah.
Okay, Lisa.
I am vegan, so I pretty much pack all my own meals. So I don't really have favorite meals.
Would you like to share a favorite vegan meal that you like for anyone listening?
Yeah, I like the good to go, especially like the mushroom risotto. It's probably my favorite. So.
Okay, thank you. Kayla.
I don't remember a lot of the. I know, I remember once having grits with cheese and bacon, and that was great. It was something along those lines.
Cheesy potatoes.
Cheesy potatoes, yeah. And then the beans and rice were great, and I know that's your namesake, so I'd say that was my favorite dinner.
All right, Eric.
Cacio e pepe for breakfast, the peanut noodles for dinner, and I love everything on the trip except for the egg burrito. Amazingly enough, I'm not a big fan of it. The cleanup is tough on that one.
That's what happens.
The cacio e pepe was my worst,
right.
So we will swap each other's.
There were a couple of guys that I had in Yellowstone who'd been on a couple of trips, and they were like, "Can we just skip the cacio e pepe? Do you have anything else in your van that we could bring for that morning?" Yeah, it's strange. I think that the dinners, the breakfasts are polarizing. Just in general, some people, if you're a sweet breakfast person, you're not going to like the savory stuff. If you're a savory person, you don't like the sweet stuff. And sometimes you're like, I would never, most people would look at the cacio e pepe and I would never have this for breakfast.
That's fair.
Yeah. Katie.
Yes. Let's talk about the planning curriculum briefly. So how much time did you guys spend with the planning curriculum? And let's just do that. How much time did you spend with it? Was it a helpful process for getting ready for the trip? Because you have all come from different experience levels.
Maybe let's go to Kaylor as a beginner, and then we'll move Eric or Lisa as one of our returnees. So Kaylor, go ahead and what was that process like, and how much time did you put into it?
I think that you will get out of it what you put into it. So for me, I spent a lot of time whenever we would get a prompt, each week you would have kind of a different topic. And so I put a lot of effort into doing research and trying to be thoughtful in my response. And I also think that the gear, 1 week you're really focused on gear and putting in your weights and all of the different items. And for me, that took a long time because I never backpacked before. So it took a long time to just get everything that I needed, knowing what I needed, and really fine tuning that. So for me, that took a long time. I think for other people that have backpacked a lot and really have tuned in their gear, that would take no time at all.
Okay, so I'm going to put this over to Eric. Eric, you're on the screen. So you've been on a lot of trips now. How much time do you put into the prep before you go?
So on my first trip, I did every single step of the planning curriculum and found it all very helpful. For the next three trips, I focused a lot on the packing list because that was my way of making sure I had everything and forcing me to take it out and look at it, make sure it was in good shape and ready to go if I hadn't used it already that season. In the later trips, I think the constants besides that were the conditions report, because I just found it personally interesting. Every year, the range of sources for weather reports and trail conditions and everything else just improved. So it was fun to try and track down some of the things we were asked to look at. And the route finding, which is, always been something that I need more practice on.
Okay, thank you. So Katie, we're at 59 minutes. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking maybe we could just finish. Yeah, are you highlighting that last question?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's go for it then.
Great. So this, I think, would be great to hear from everybody on this one. What advice would you give to someone who's considering applying for the trip? And so let's start with Connor, since we haven't heard from you in a little bit.
Sure.
And
So
Connor, I'm going to interrupt you too. So Neil asked actually a specific question to you. Says you had quite a lot of experience coming off the CDT. I think he might have meant Pacific Crest Trail. He's curious what you wanted or got out of our trip. So maybe combine the two. And
sure.
Yeah.
I will do my best. I'll probably just rattle two answers for the two separate, and try and weave a connected
Okay.
story. So coming off the PCT, I really didn't have a lot of like long-term route finding. The route finding that I had been exposed to was on day hikes up in the Catskills on some of the trailless peaks. So I really wanted to have a true off-trail wilderness experience with in an environment that provided a real challenge and majesty around it. And so the Alaska trip was really those were two of the driving factors for that. That I really just didn't get in doing a long trail like the PCT. But yeah, my advice for anybody applying is do it for sure. Worst thing that happens is it's, hey, maybe next year try and get this type of experience. But the other key thing, and I think all of us have touched on it in different elements, is just really the like having a real like low ego when you're filling out that application, because not only are your answers and kind of self-reflection outcomes directly going to impact your enjoyment of the trip, but it also impacts the other people on your trip and the ability for the guides to kind of do their jobs well. And so I think that the biggest piece of advice I've given to people who I've recommended the trips to is to say, really have like um, a real understanding of what your answers are and why you're trying to go out there, because I think it helps the process work to the best that it can, and that in turn I feel gives you the best opportunity to have a trip that's going to be memorable and a really impactful.
Okay. Thank you, Connor. Okay, Kaylor, you're going to be next. You're on mute.
Sorry, I saw it. I would echo that if you're thinking about applying, you should apply. I feel like I lean pretty anxious, and I had just such an incredible experience, and I don't think there was a person that went on our trip that didn't come away with at least something. And and yeah, be honest with your application. I don't think I have anything new to add other than you won't regret it.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Eric.
Second everything that's been said so far. I would just add that if you are accepted to a trip, jump on the details right away, because time passes quickly, and the more preparation, the more time you have to prepare ahead of time, the better you'll feel going into the trip, feeling like you've covered all your bases. That's an important thing to start with.
That's great advice, because we definitely get some folks who sign up with who are very optimistic early on. They kind of get behind the 8 ball, and then they get it's tough for them at the end, and it can be pretty overwhelming. Okay, Lisa, why don't you finish up for us?
Okay, I think the only thing really I could add to what's already been said is to seriously consider your location, the location you're interested in. If you don't like hot and dry, you might not want to be looking at going to Escalante, where you have to, look for water on occasions, and it's not always abundant. If you, love wildlife, maybe Yellowstone would be the place that you'd really want to key in on. So, and consider, like, Alaska's probably not the best, trip for you if you're a beginner, or this is your first trip out backpacking. It's probably not the place to take a first, backpacking trip. So consider the location carefully, and again, just be, really honest with yourself and through the application process about your fitness level. So.
That's great advice from everyone. Yeah.
Okay, so everyone who joined us, thank you. My panel, it's been lovely. It's, I'm always sort of flattered at this organization that we have and the people that we get to work with. So thanks for being 4 of them. We have a lot of other great people out there, but thanks for taking the time tonight to join us and answer questions from a bunch of prospective applicants. So thanks. Okay, Katie, we ready? We'll see everyone next Thursday.
Yep. We'll see you all next Thursday.
Okay.
Thanks again, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.